Meeting of the Colerain Township Zoning Commission will come to order. Would you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring.
Here.
Miss McMullen.
Here.
Miss Smith.
Here.
Mr. Gehring.
Here.
Mr. Grody. Mr. Westfall.
Here.
And Mr. Wilson is not here.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Wilson. Yes, here. Okay, is here.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the oath of office for Mr.
Gary.
Gary.
Gary, you want to come on down? Yep. Don't worry, I got a little cheat sheet for you.
We don't.
Raise your right hand.
I, Bruce Gehring, solemnly
Go ahead, I solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States of America.
I solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
The Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio,
and the laws and resolutions of Colerain Township to the best of my ability,
and the laws and resolutions of Colerain Township to the best of my ability,
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and faithfully discharge the duties
of a primary member on the Board of Zoning Appeals in and for Colerain Township,
of a primary member of the Board of Zoning Appeals in and for Colerain Township,
Hamilton County, State of Ohio, so help me God.
Hamilton County, State of Ohio, so help me God.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sign this real
Go ahead. Okay. Next on the agenda is the election of officers. No?
fast. Got two more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who's next?
We can do Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson. It's your turn.
All right. Please raise your right hand. I, Kevin Wilson, solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
I, Kevin Wilson, solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio,
and the laws and resolutions of Colerain Township,
and the laws and resolutions of Colerain Township,
and to the best of my ability,
and to the best of my ability,
will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
as an alternate member on the Board of Zoning Commission
as an alternate member of the Board of the Zoning Commission
in and for Colerain Township,
in and for Colerain Township,
Hamilton County, State of Ohio, so help me God.
Hamilton County, State of Ohio, so help me God. Thank you.
And Mr. Westfall, last but not least.
There you go.
Please raise your right hand. I, Thomas Westfall,
I, Thomas Westfall,
solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States,
solemnly swear that I will uphold the laws of the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
and the laws and the Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio,
Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio,
and the laws and resolutions of Colerain Township,
and the laws and resolutions of Colerain Township,
and to the best of my ability will faithfully discharge the duties
and to the best of my ability will faithfully discharge the duties
of an alternate member on the Board of Zoning Commission in and for Colerain Township,
of an alternate member of the Board of Zoning Commission and in and for the Township of Hamilton County, State of Ohio.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think some of you just heard what happened. The reason I'm doing this meeting is I was vice chairman last year, and we had to have an election of officers and things, so I would be, and Mr. Grody is not here tonight, so, and he was the chair, so I will do that until, I don't know, that's why I'm here. Okay, next on the agenda is election of officers. Question. Do we like them both at the same time or one at the same one?
I think you can do one and then make a motion for that one and then make a motion for the second officer.
Okay,
So maybe start with the chair and then we can do a vice chair.
okay. The chair would accept nominations for the chairman of the zoning commission for the year 2020.
I'd also like to just note for the board that Mr. Grody did express interest at the previous meeting held, and then we also sent an email out to the board members stating his interest. So I wanted to put that on the record. And you are free to nominate.
Do I hear a nomination?
I nominate Al Grody.
Second the nomination.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Al Grody be the chairman of the commission for the year 2020. Could we have a roll call, please? Or can we just voice it?
Who was the first and who was the second?
Mrs. Smith was
Ms.
first.
Smith was first. Got it. Okay. I heard her. They were both about the same time, so, all right. All right, I'll go ahead with the roll call. Mr. Faring,
Yes.
Ms. McMullen,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Westfall,
Aye.
and Mr. Garing.
Yes.
Okay, that means Mr. Grody will be the chair next year. The chair will entertain a motion for a nomination for the vice chairman for the year of the zoning commission, Colerain Township Zoning Commission for the year 2020. Do I hear any nominations?
I nominate Ms. McMullen.
Okay, there's a nomination on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Ms. McMullen be the vice chairman for the year 2020. Can we have a roll call, please?
All right, I'll go ahead. Mr. Faring,
Yes.
Ms. McMullen,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Westfall,
All right,
Mr. Garing.
Aye.
Motion passes.
motion passes. Congratulations to both of you. Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for December 17th, 2019. Does anybody have any additions or changes to the minutes?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
At the bottom of the minutes, under section A, it states it was Speedway. And to my memory, I don't think we had Speedway last time.
I know. Basically, it says, the first one was ZA8, 1988, ZA2, 2016-09 Speedway. Mr. Kohler presented the case and reviewed approved procedures for preliminary and final development plans.
That should have been,
Assisted living.
That was,
A couple months ago.
it was for assisted living, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What page is that on?
It's on the very first page.
It's on the
Item
first
A.
page, right at the bottom.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith.
All right, you're welcome.
oh, that's right in the title. Yep. We'll correct that to reflect that that was the Gateway Senior Housing on Springdale Road.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other corrections and additions or additions? None so appearing, the chair will will entertain a motion to accept the minutes as changed.
I'll make a motion that we accept it as changed.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the minutes of the December 17th meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring,
Yes.
Ms. McMullen,
I was not present, so abstain.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Westfall,
Aye.
Mr. Gehring.
Yes.
Motion carried. Next on the agenda is public address. This is where anybody who would like to bring anything before the zoning commission that is not on the agenda, this is where you do it. Would anybody like to address the zoning commission? None so appearing, we'll move on. Next is a public hearing. Is a final next is a final development plan for ZA 2005-03 Stone Creek La Pinata, 3723 Stone Creek Boulevard. It's a final development plan for a new restaurant. Staff, do you have a presentation?
Yes, we do. This is a proposal to construct a 5,083 square foot restaurant in the Stone Creek Town Center. Stone Creek Town Center is located just off Colerain Avenue at 275. It's north of Springdale Road. This is an aerial photograph showing it's kind of like Restaurant Row that fronts onto 275. We have a Logan's Roadhouse, TGI Fridays, Olive Garden, and a Quaker Steak restaurant. And this is in the red box showing the location for the proposed La Pinata. Meyer is the main anchor of this shopping center. The property is zoned PDB, which is Planned Development Business. It's surrounded by commercial along the Colerain Avenue corridor and has some residential to the south of the development. Actually, I-275 is zoned residential. This is showing the actual lot lines. It's the only vacant spot in this row. And actually, this is the final segment to the Colerain Town Center that started back in 2005. All of the other elements have been completed. This is the preliminary development plan that was approved back in 2005. There's a little bit of a blow-up of the site for the La Pinata, showing a restaurant pad in this particular location. That development plan was actually enlarged in about 2007 to add some other developments along Colerain Avenue, but the bulk of this development has pretty much followed pad for pad the pattern that was approved in the original development plan. A final development plan was approved for Quaker Steak, which is just to the west of this site. That particular final development plan also reflected the future restaurant on this particular location and pretty much reflects what we're looking at as the development plan for tonight. On the other side, there's Olive Garden, and their parking lot shows, it's kind of hard to see in real light lines off to the left, the extension of parking for this La Pinata restaurant. This is a view of the site looking across from the Meyer parking lot. There's shared monument signs throughout the development. This is one of them that was specifically designed to advertise the restaurants that are along the interstate corridor. So one of those panels would have La Pinata on it. And then there's another one closer to Colerain Avenue on Stone Creek Boulevard that has a panel for sign for this La Pinata. The top is sort of a panoramic view of the vacant site where this proposal would be, and then to the left is the Olive Garden, to the right is Quaker Steak. So it's kind of saddled between those two. Another ground level view of the site. To the south of the site is a path. It's been kind of rebranded and issued as the Colerain Connector or the Main Street Trail. This connects up to Springdale Road and connects to Colerain Park and so forth. And that was actually part of the original development plan. There's a large pylon sign that's on the Olive Garden property that is for the entire Stone Creek Town Center, and that's clearly visible from I-275. There's a large detention basin to the south. A couple views of that detention basin with Meyer in the background. That detention basin was designed for pretty much the entire development, although there'll be some additional detention as part of this development. Another view looking from the Olive Garden parking lot towards the proposed La Pinata site. This is the final development plan that you have in your packet. Again, the calls for the 5,083 square foot restaurant with parking. This can seat 167 people. The proposal has 112 off-street parking spaces, and there are 17 trees and numerous shrubs as part of the landscaping. This is the landscape plan for the development. One thing to call your attention, there is a laser pointer, yes. There's a parking island at this location. That is actually supposed to have 270 square feet of area in it and be at least 10 or 9 feet wide. This little portion of it's less than 9 feet wide. It's kind of a minor thing, and quite honestly, we've met with this applicant a couple times, traded phone calls and drafts, so we've ironed out the vast majority of the code-related issues. That was really the only thing that we could identify in this particular proposal that still doesn't quite meet code. This is the floor plan for the restaurant. There is both inside seating and outside patio seating. Patio seating's on the north side of the building facing I-275. And we have exterior elevations. This meets our architectural requirements for commercial districts. The applicants just submitted this. It's the rendering of the building, more three-dimensional, and a color version of the plan. I think I can actually blow that up a little bit. Pretty much the same thing that we saw with the landscape plan. Okay, so next. There we go. We also have a lighting, skipped on me. A lighting plan shows the lumens, the type of lighting that's going to be used as a cutoff LED type fixture that's downward oriented, so it will not have glare in the traffic either on site or off site. And the basis for approval of the final development plan is that it's consistent with the intent and purpose of the plan development, the PDB zone, in the following ways. Number one, the final development plan is consistent with the approval of the preliminary development plan. Secondly, the final development plan is consistent with the adjacent approval of the final development plans. That's the Olive Garden and the Quaker Steak development plans. And third, the final development plan is consistent with the provisions of the Colerain zoning resolution. Staff's recommendation is for approval of the final development plan with the following condition and variances. Number one is a condition that the parking island just north of the building be expanded to 200 square feet in accordance with section 14.6.2. Second, a variance from section 15.8.3G of the zoning resolution to allow for an additional 5 square feet of wall sign area. Actually, I didn't point that out, but I'll go back to the elevation drawings. And then third, a variance from section 13.2.2 and 13.3.4 of the zoning regulations to allow for an additional 37 parking spaces. And this is very consistent with what's been approved with the other restaurants in this particular strip. Sit-down restaurants tend to have greater parking need than drive-through restaurants. Our code doesn't really call a differentiation between those two. This particular elevation drawing shows the proposed signs. Some of the restaurants were given like up to 50% additional signage. The justification is these buildings are really seen from all four sides, and there is only the monument signs, the common monument signs. So the other restaurants were given consideration for additional. This actually computed to only 5 square feet over what we would require, or the maximum that we would allow. So that's the staff recommendation on this. Are there any questions?
Does it, excuse me. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kohler?
This is not a public hearing. The preliminary development plan is the part of the process when we have the hearing, but the applicant is here and may want to make some
Yes.
comments.
Okay. Next would be the applicant. Would they like to make a presentation?
Good evening. My name is Mark Burgess with the Civil Environmental Group. We did the site planning and the basic architecture. Along with me is Jenny Duke. She's the architect from the RDA. If you have any questions, I think the staff has, we've worked out any things that we have talked about as far as our recommendations. The parking lot was on that one parking lot. We were just following what was done in the final preliminary. If that's an issue, we don't have a problem with changing that over, losing that parking space. That was one reason
Sure.
following. And as far as signage, I think we're just trying to meet what else is out there already, like you already quoted, basically, is to meet those recommendations for approval. If you have any questions for me or for Jenny, I'm more than willing to answer.
Does anyone have any questions from him, for the applicant?
None from staff.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Does anybody on the commission have anything they would like to say about this application? Okay. If no comments, the chair would entertain a motion to accept this plan as stated. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Would that motion be subject to the conditions made by staff? Just to clarify for the record?
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's great.
Sorry, yes, with the conditions made by staff.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the ZA 2005.03 Stone Creek the Pinata Restaurant. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes.
With staff recommendations.
Staff recommendation, the 3 conditions listed by staff. It would be Ms. McMullen,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Westfall,
Aye.
Mr. Faring,
Yes.
and Mr. Gehring.
Yes.
All right.
Motion carried. We get started.
Soon.
Good, we'll be watching. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a public hearing for case number ZA 2019-09, Woodside Village, 3431 Springdale Road. A zoning map of management from R6 urban residential to PDR planned development residential. Staff, do you have a presentation?
Yes, this is an application submitted by Pete Swigerath with NV Residential Land LLC, representing the property owner, which is Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints. The property is currently vacant. It's on Springdale Road between Niagara and Laura Linda. It's on the south, I guess you'd call it southeast side of the road. It has a little over 8 acres on the property. This is the outline of the property. It's mostly wooded. There's a little bit in the front that's just grass that's mowed on the site. It's surrounded by single-family development on the west, south, and east sides. Across the street is a nursing home that's also a planned development. Property is currently zoned R6, which is urban residential. It's urban residential also to the south and to the west. It's planned development residential to the west. It's the Arborwood, I believe, which included both multifamily, single-family, and the Strip Commercial Center, which is Speedway. That was all done as one overall planned development, probably back in the early 70s. Across the street is the nursing home. That's a planned development residential. That was approved about 6 years ago, I believe. This is a street view from across the street looking into the site. Again, it's mostly wooded. Another street view of the site. There are no sidewalks, but you can tell that there's a lot of pedestrian traffic in front of this property. There is a proposal to do sidewalks as part of this development. It would connect to sidewalks going onto the, I guess it's northeast. There are no sidewalks connecting to the southwest, though, on Springdale Road. Another view of the open area in the front. This is a nursing home across the street. It's a combination of the two-story and one-story building. And the property, it's kind of scrub type woods towards the front, the Springdale Road. And as it goes back, it gradually gets a little bit more mature in the tree growth. A lot of overgrown. There's unfortunately been a lot of dumping that's even way back into the woods. So there's a lot of cleanup work that probably needs to happen with these wooded areas that are going to be proposed to be left in its natural state. This is looking towards the very south side of the property, the stubbed street off of Colerain Drive. You can tell the trees are a little bit bigger at the back end of the property. This is the stub street from Arborwood Drive. This would be on the east side of the property. The proposal is to not use either of these as street connections. The entire street connection would be off of Springdale Road. This is the final development plan. You have this in your packet. You can see that the development is really on the northern half of the property, with the entire southern part of the property being left in its natural state. Calls for a 3-story multifamily building, which would be, I guess you call them flats type apartments, and then 2 smaller buildings at the rear, which would be 2-floor townhouse type developments or buildings. A little bit bigger view of the part to be developed. Has parking. This is a preliminary development plan, so a lot of the details are going to be filled in with your final development plan. Part of that final piece will be the final unit count. They're proposing 66. According to the plan, the application says up to 70, so there's, give or take 4 units. But we don't know the mix of how many bedrooms are going to be in the units. The significant part of that is we use the number of bedrooms to compute the parking demand. So this parking looks sufficient if we have a fairly good mix of 2 and 1 bedroom apartments. But this will need to be calculated out in detail with the final development plan. This is a rendering of what the proposed architecture would look like for the 3-story building. This is the building that would be closest to Springdale Road. And this is a rendering of what the townhouse type buildings would look like that's further back on the property. The findings, there's 7 findings in our zoning code. That's a required thing that we need to do. The first is that the PD district and preliminary development plan are consistent with the adopted Colerain Township land use plan and Colerain Township comprehensive plan. Staff's finding is the proposed development falls within the Colerain Avenue character area near the border to the Northbrook-Groesbeck corridor or character area. The Colerain area contains a land use guideline of encourage the development of mixed-use development or town center along Colerain Avenue corridor that will incorporate pedestrian scale environment with a mixture of commercial, office, and high-density residential uses. Such a development should be designed to create a focal point for the township, and under the appropriate land use section of the comp plan, there's a statement of mixed-use development, including residential, office, and commercial uses. The second finding is that the proposed use will have a beneficial effect on the community. Colerain has about 76% in single-family detached units. Of the occupied housing units, 74% are owner-occupied. A market study prepared by Den Focused Marketing in 2018 for the potential redevelopment of Northgate Mall indicated, in this quote, a strong first-ring suburb market depth for new rental housing choices. Third, the internal streets and primary and secondary roads that are proposed properly interconnect with the surrounding existing road network. For this development, there are no internal streets proposed. The parking access is designed to meet the Colerain zoning requirements. The access drive to Springdale Road shall be approved by the Hamilton County engineer. Number 4, the site will be accessible from public roads that are generally adequate to carry the traffic that will be imposed upon them by the proposed development, and streets and driveways on the site will be adequate to serve the residents or occupants of the proposed development. The finding is that the proposed development has direct access to Springdale Road, which is a county thoroughfare of sufficient capacity to serve the development. The proposal has been forwarded to the Hamilton County engineer for comments. The response was in the staff report. This will be required to have a traffic impact study as part of this, and that traffic impact study is approved by the county engineer. Number 5, the minimum common open space areas have been designated and shall be duly transferred to a legally established homeowners association where applicable, or have been dedicated by and accepted by Colerain Township or another public or quasi-public agency as provided in subsection 9.3.7 dealing with common open space. This is actually a single parcel, single tract development. So by definition, the open space that's designated is common to this development. Over half of the site is proposed to remain undisturbed, and the impervious lot coverage is about 25%. Number 6, the preliminary development plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of the resolution, in particular, the furtherance of the purpose of the PD district as set forth in 9.3.1. The proposed project calls for the preservation of over half the site as open wooded space in exchange for higher density in the proposed portion of the site, in keeping with the goal of preserving natural features. The proposed multifamily housing would not be permitted with any of the existing residential zones in Colerain due to the proposed density of development. The R6 zone currently allows only a maximum of 4 units in a single building on a single lot. If the property were zoned the R7 multifamily zoning district, the maximum number of units to be developed is 62. The planned district is needed to allow for more flexible zoning requirements. And finally, the preliminary development plan has been transmitted to all other agencies and departments charged with the responsibility of review. We did not submit this to the Hamilton County Planning Commission, but we did to the Hamilton County Stormwater and Infrastructure. We did not receive a response. Colerain Fire Department did respond with no objections. Hamilton County GIS, we received no response. Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation, did we receive comments? It's pretty much their standard requirements for all developments. ODOT, we received no response. However, this is not on a state highway or impacting a state highway. Hamilton County Engineer, we did receive the response basically requiring that traffic impact study. Metropolitan Sewer District, we did not receive a response. Staff's recommendation is for approval of preliminary development plan for the rezoning of the property from R6 urban residential to PDR plan development residential as submitted with the following conditions and variances. Number one, that the final development plan shall include an assessment of the quality of the existing vegetation to remain on the property. Following the assessment, a plan shall be made for supplemental planting of evergreens for screening from the adjacent areas where appropriate. The elimination of and removal of poor quality vegetation or invasive species and any other treatment of this area in order to make it a desirable screening amenity for the residents of the adjacent adjacent to the development. Number two, that a final building elevation shall be in keeping with the designs and materials contained within the submitted application with the preliminary development plan. Number three, that the final development plan shall meet the parking requirements of section 13.3.2 of the zoning resolution. Number four, that the final development plan be submitted and reviewed in accordance with the provisions of section 4.5.2I of the zoning resolution. That's basically the procedures for development plan approval. And number five, that the additional right-of-way dedicated on Springdale Road and the traffic impact study be conducted per the Hamilton County Engineer's recommendation. So we are recommending approval subject to those conditions. This is a public hearing. Any questions?
Do any of you have any questions for Mr. Coleman?
I have one question. I
Sure.
noticed on the plan, it says the proposed use is 66 units of senior workforce housing. What is senior workforce housing?
That is actually a typo on the plan. They did not intend to say senior. It is simply workforce housing.
Okay.
I asked that same question.
What is workforce housing?
I will let the applicant explain. I did put a definition in the staff report, which is our understanding of what workforce housing is. Where did I put that? I think I put it in there. Maybe not.
Maybe we could just defer that question to the applicant when they have their
Workforce
presentation.
housing is an affordable financing program. It is funded through the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, but that's a term that they use. Pardon? No. HUD is a federal program.
Is it similar to HUD though, just through the state?
It is.
Again, I think that might be the best person to answer that would be the person who's applying it. We have the information, but in this instance, we're passing it on. Our expertise is in zoning code and development review, whereas the applicant is probably well-versed in the type of housing they're applying for.
Does the applicant have a presentation they would like to share?
I would ask that, given that this is a public hearing, we can go ahead and swear in at this point people who intend to provide testimony. Anyone who plans to speak tonight or sign in, if you could please stand and raise your right hand. Stand. You swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Commission members. Pete Schwigerot with MVAH Partners, 9100 Center Point Drive, Westchester, Ohio, 45069. Thanks for your time tonight. We appreciate your considerations. As you saw, we came to you in front of you last month with a senior housing proposal, which recently has been approved by the trustees, and thanks for your recommendation. I mentioned that because in that meeting we mentioned how we had done a market study and identified needs for various housing types in your community. In particular, a lack of senior housing and workforce housing was identified in that in that market study. Speaking that we were talking to the concept of workforce housing, I will speak to that. And it's a very general term that's really used for multifamily housing, multifamily rental product. Workforce housing can be conventional market rate, it can be tax credit, or it could be have other affordable programs like HUD associated with it. It's a very generic term that's used for housing intended for the workforce, rental housing intended for the workforce. So, and I will get a little bit into the funding and program here shortly. I don't need to really get into the site plan too much just because staff does such an excellent job detailing that. I will make a few points related to, we are trying to be sensitive to the adjacent neighbors. The connectivity into the neighborhood, we intentfully did not connect into the neighborhood knowing that those connections haven't been there, and we didn't want to create opportunities for cut-through traffic or for the neighborhood and surrounding area to be impacted by our traffic or possibilities of how that might change circulation. That being said, we also made sure our plan created good internal circulation so that we have the ability for fire trucks and emergency vehicles and so forth to get in. And for whatever reason, the community or the fire department or streets departments wanted us or required us to connect, we'd be willing, but we feel it's a better sensitive thing to do for the neighborhood to not have those connections come active. We are required to provide a 25-foot setback buffer to the adjacent residents. What we've done though, and then also on top of that, a 40-foot building setback to adjacent residents. That's what the code would say is required. However, because we have the space here, we have done some increases. Our plan actually holds a 40-foot setback as a total. So on the sides of the property, we are going to be able to maintain the first 40 foot of woods surrounding us on the east and west sides of the property as an extended buffer to the requirements to the adjacent neighbors. In addition to that, then we're expanding our building setback from what is required to be 40 to 65 feet, so that, again, residents and the adjacent residents have a buffer and a setback that goes substantially beyond what the existing buffer and setback would require. And as you can see, we're really focusing most of our development on the northern portion of this property. It's the most highly developable area, and also this allows us to preserve that back 5 acres. I would imagine a lot of these residents have enjoyed this property being open space and woodlands, and we feel it is a benefit to the neighborhood and are going to preserve, obviously, a substantial portion of that as part of this development. We do want to provide a variety of housing types, and that's why we have a variety of housing options here. It is what the market said, is there was really a need for single one-bed apartments for young professionals, people starting out their adulthood, whether that be someone out of college or someone who was just taking a job here recently. Those 1-beds and 2-bed units will be attractive to them. And then in the rear, these townhomes will be attractive to families in your community, offering 3- and 4-bed units, 2 baths, and anything above 1 unit. 1-bed unit has 2 baths, fully amenitized units. Those 4 beds are around 1,300 square foot. The 3 beds are around 1,200 square foot. And so we've got a variety of options. Inside there, we're going to have a full-time on-site manager, fitness center, a business center, a community room, a theater, all in our main building, accessible to residents throughout the day. We're going to have services and programming to provide access through transportation. We're going to work with the township to connect the sidewalk. Obviously, we're going to do it out in front of us, but we're working on how we can connect that to the mall. We feel this will have a good benefit to the mall, bringing workforce housing. The amount of jobs and employment there at the mall and in the surrounding area is tremendous, and these are the families and households that are going to fill those jobs and help create some synergy between those commercial uses and your core. So with that, we're excited about being here. Related to the program, we are applying for funding through the state of Ohio. It's the Housing Credit Program. It is not HUD housing. It's not Section 8. We have no rent subsidy. HUD and Section 8 programs provide a rent subsidy. That means the resident's rent is be paying by a voucher, or a HUD, or in this case, it's a CMHA voucher that would pay their rent for them. Our product is different in that we use the credits, and we're required to rent restrict, meaning that our resident is paying their own rent, but we're required to keep it at an affordable level. So if market in the community says that a two-bedroom unit might go for $1,000 a unit, well, we might offer it up at $900 a unit. There's an advantage to the resident of your community, a better rent rate for a higher quality product. With that, we do target 80% AMI for the county. That's adjusted median income for the county. However, for families in Hamilton County, that income bar is $70,000 and under. So your firefighters, your teachers, your police officers, your entire service sector, anyone out there making $17 to $27 an hour meets these income bandwidths. This is a majority of the Northbrook community, the Grosse Brett community. And so we want to provide some new high quality housing that will serve families and young professionals in your community. And we think this will do a good job. And we're trying to be sensitive with the site and how we buffer and treat neighbors, and certainly happy to answer any questions they may have as we continue here. Thanks for your time.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions?
Yes, I do. Explain to me what a housing credit is.
Housing tax credit's a program administered by the state that the goal is to deliver affordable housing. And with that, their definition of affordable housing is 80% adjusted median income and under. And so they have a program and funds available that we can apply for to develop high quality yet affordable housing. So the senior housing is the same way that we had brought through before. We can apply for funding to build the housing. The commitments we make to the state are, though, is that we will target the 80% income bandwidth, and that we will offer residents that are able to take advantage of this housing a discount in rent to market.
So how is this different from subsidy?
Well, a subsidy, a rent voucher, if we had a project-based voucher, a HUD voucher, that subsidy is paid for by that voucher, and so the rent is paid for by a voucher. We have no vouchers. Our residents will pay their own rent.
Okay, how close is this to the one that you came last time, the senior citizen place? How close is this development?
Proximity, it's probably 600, 700 feet, I would say, or yards maybe, 600 feet between the senior development and the site. Is that what you're asking, how far between the two developments?
Right, how close in distance are they?
It's around 700 feet.
So congestion and traffic you are prepared to deal with?
Yes, certainly. As mentioned, this is condition. We will be providing and doing traffic studies. We feel we've got the access point designed in the right spot from our civil engineers. But as we bring back you a final development plan, we will have all the studies and data to show that, Springdale Road's being designed appropriately to accommodate the development.
So the exit will be on Springdale Road?
Yes. And one thing I will note, and because there was some confusion, and I apologize for the edit in our drawing, is at one point we were thinking we may do 66 or even 70 units. We have determined that at most we will do 66 units, which is consistent with what is allowable on the site as a maximum. So these plans show more like 70 units, but the site plan will be adjusted downward, and we would be happy to accommodate a condition of 66 units.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry, 62 units.
62.
So if I'm listening to this right, the subsidy part of it, the state is offering that to you for building this. As long as you offer it to low-income people or 80% or whatever it happened to be, regardless who that is, you're getting your subsidy right up front.
Yes, it helps us build a higher quality product. For example, there's going to be, hopefully, I would imagine at some point a proposal that comes forward on Northgate Mall to develop market rate apartments there. I mean, it's kind of the new lifestyle thing, and a lot of malls are seeing that. Or within the mall area, there will be opportunities for that. And, you know, the thing about developing market rate apartments these days is you can get land for free, and just to build the apartment unit, rents can be in these new products that are being built all over, you know, downtown or various suburbs around the market. They're driving rents of $1.50, $1.70 to build those brand new apartments. So you're talking about one-bedroom units that can be $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. Two-bedroom units are $1,400 to $1,800. That's the reality of what brand new market rate apartments look like these days. And the reality is you know, a majority of your community is going to struggle to pay those rents. To be honest with you, that's a tough rent. That's a mortgage and plus in a lot of cases. And so the great thing about this program is it allows us to build that quality product, offer it to your residents, and offer it a much more reasonable rent level that they can now save faster for ownership and you know, pay their bills quicker, pay down their student loans or whatever, you know, put their kids in more programming. So that's the benefit of the program. Our residents are paying their own rent, but that unit that might have cost $1,200, $1,300, we might be able to offer it at $900. Now, in addition to the income qualification and the age qualification on the senior deal, so they got to make the 60%, the 80% bar that I had mentioned. We still do the most stringent approach of fair housing that qualifying as we can do. So we're allowed to, and it is a automatic denial if you have a felony on your record. We do that across our portfolio. Same thing for domestic violence. So we are able to do screening to protect and preserve and make sure we have a healthy and safe environment. But we have no rent subsidy. Our residents are paying their own rent. We're just required to deliver them an affordable rent.
Any further questions?
Yes, how many tenants do you expect?
Well, with the 62 units, we will likely have maybe 10 or so, I'm sorry, the 10 or 12 units, those townhomes, the two-story are 3 and 4 bedrooms. So, you know, certainly you could imagine a family with a couple kids being in those units. In the main building, it's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. So certainly ones are typically housing a single individual, sometimes a couple, and 2 beds can vary from singles to you know, a single parent mom with a child. So it varies. I would say we probably average 1.2 to 1.6 residents per unit. With those townhomes, that'll probably increase it a little bit.
So how many does that equal?
Say again?
So how many does that equal? How many
It
people?
would just vary. It would depend on the families that apply and qualify.
How many do you expect to be there?
Estimate, so we'll just say 2 per unit, so as many as 100 and, anywhere between 100 and 120 residents maybe.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I just want to say that as a resident of Northbrook, I know on Laura Linda Drive, a lot of emphasis was just put in for doing ornamental street trees. And I would hope that that character that has just been built into the neighborhood could continue along the frontage of Springdale as well. And it does help knowing that there is a background check included, not to make a generalization that renters commit more crimes than those that own their homes, but just having that little bit of guarantee that we're not putting those with felonies or domestic violence or such so close, and it's in such a density in that area to maybe further some of the issues that the neighborhood is having.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The chair would entertain a motion to open the public hearing portion of this. Do I have a motion?
I'll
I have a
second.
motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Gearing?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. We'll open a public hearing now. We request that as you talk, you be succinct and talk as, get get to your point as quickly as you can, and we would prefer no redundancy. The first person on the list is Sandra Agee.
Yes, I'd like to relinquish my time to my neighbor who lives across the street. There's only 2 houses.
We normally don't do that.
Okay.
Well, there is no time limit, so there's no problem doing that.
Okay.
And if you could just please state your name and address when you speak.
Good evening, I'm Sharon King, 9802 MELCARL Drive, Mill Carl. And I will be succinct as possible. Thank you, Ms. Smith and Ms. McMullen, for those questions, because those now are off my plate. But I don't see the relevance in rewarding a landlord who hasn't been a good landlord to the current residents. For more than 20 years, my family and other neighbors have had issues with that landlord, trees falling, debris, nuanced properties, people running through the neighborhood, living in the back 5 acres that you referred to. There have been people camping there, breaking into homes, including my neighbor, who had her home broken into, her car stolen. My house, my mother's home, for 3 different times in the last 15 years, have had trees fall, damaging more than $30,000 with no recourse. I've had to pay for that. The tool sheds, right now, I have 2 cars that were completely destroyed by that same landlord that we now want to reward. So I don't see the reason to reward someone who has yet been a good neighbor with that back 5 acres. In addition to that, I work with workforce development, and you can't control the element. I am that person who makes less than $70,000 a year. But I don't think that the pretty picture you painted is the whole story. So I would like more information on how and who will be living in those units. It's not enough to say what might be. I like to know what will be. Changing the zoning, he answered that question. I'd like to know more about the Springdale access. 120 people, that seems a little low in numbers. 120 people for 60 units. Most folks have 2 to 3 kids, especially in workforce development areas. So I would think there'd be more like 4 people per unit. That'd be 240 people, not 120. I think that's all on my notes. But most of all, that last 5 acres needs to be cleaned up. There is so much damage back there. There are people who live in that last 5 acres, and the church knows it. We have written many letters, and they have done nothing. Absolutely nothing. The debris, the element, I myself have called the police no less than 5 times in the last 2 years. There are shootings back there. That access that you don't want to touch is where the element that robbed the bank that was on Springdale, that's where they run to. I apologize for my phone. I thought I turned it off. So it's more than just providing workforce development. It's providing security and sanity for the existing neighbors. So that 5 acres, as much as McMullen, we would like more trees that make everything look pretty, we're asking for safety. We're asking that those of us who have lived here, I was born or I was raised here, I've lived around the world, but when I come home, I have senior citizens who I have to check on. And one of them's here. They broke into her home, I'm reiterating, and then they came back the next day. They took her keys and came back the next day and took her car. And where did they go through? That back 5 acres. I have another senior 3 doors away. If you just go down the tree line, those trees are all dead. And they had the opportunity to clean it up this past winter. They chose not to, because now we know why. They were concentrating on building these units. So if you're representing us, then I ask you to represent us, not just for redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you.
For, Mr. Chairman, can I ask just to provide the applicant the opportunity to clarify?
Sure.
I think the speaker had stated that he is the current landlord, and I don't think that's exactly true.
Yeah, no,
He's
just
not-
to clarify, Pete Schwiggert's with MBH Partners. We just have a purchase contract to purchase the property. We are not the owner of the property. Certainly upon acquiring the property, we will take maintenance and responsibility and be a good neighbor. We do agree there are the dead trees on the property. Unfortunately, what looks like great woods is probably a nuisance. That will be part of our cleanup as we redevelop the property. I will also make note that we do have full-time on-site management. That's eyes and ears watching after the site. We have security cameras and lighting in our parking lots to make sure we have a lot of visibility and access. So I really think, if anything, we're gonna have a benefit. I'm right now what is an absentee landlord who's in, I believe, Illinois, who owns a piece of property and doesn't even have any local resources to take care of it. So I hope we can address that, or actually improve that circumstance rather than, we're not part of the existing circumstance.
Mr. Sweeter, could you also maybe address one additional question? I think the previous speaker had a question about the unit mix, and I know you do have the townhomes, which are shown here. There's going to be 12 of them on the site, 2 buildings with 6. That was the previous slide, Marty. The townhomes that are 6, so those are going to be the ones that have the 3 to 4 bedrooms in it. So there would be maybe up to 12 3 to 4 bedrooms, but a majority of the units are going to be located in the 3-story building that's located up there near Springdale Road. And that will contain what kind of a mix? That's the 1 to 2 bedrooms?
Ones and twos. It's
right there.
likely
Okay.
about a 50-50 mix of ones and twos.
Ones and twos.
Of the, yeah, and in that, there's, like I said, on-site management. That's a secured building. It has electronic fob entrances to get into the building, cameras at every access point, cameras in every hallway. And then in addition to that, we have cameras in the parking lots as well.
So those would be the 1 and 2 bedroom units there then? Okay.
And it's definitely a majority of the units.
Right. Ma'am, if you could, please, if you're going to have to stand up. Just, we have it's all for public records, and there's rules about sunshine laws, et cetera. So we just want to make sure everything's on the record, and we're keeping everything above board. So
We have your name.
Yes,
Name and
my
address.
name is Bobby Thompson.
Thompson?
Yes.
And the address.
Okay, and the question that I have, I live on Arborwood
I need-
Drive.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
need your address too, please.
9867 Arborwood Drive.
Okay, thank you.
And my house is right behind the vacant property. And right now, I have problems with people like, young teenagers rather coming.
Were you sworn in? I
Oh,
think you should ask
no.
some questions, so why
Yeah.
don't we just go ahead and swear you?
Okay.
You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. And I have a problem now with teenagers coming through my yard. And I want to know with the new building that you're putting up, will there be a fence or anything there to keep them from, making traffic through our yards?
So, I think our goal was, and our intent wasn't necessarily to fence in the property as a whole. It's certainly something we can consider if there's spots that need fencing.
She saw that rear 5 acres you got.
Rear 5?
You say how to fence it.
Gotcha. I think we're open to discussion about the best way to deal with screening and making sure our residents, or for what it's worth, possibly folks that are more likely trespassing onto this property and then coming through, we're open to that discussion. Our goals were to do most of our screening and buffering with these expanded buffers and preserving trees. But that being said, as I say that, I do commit that we will be taking out anything dead and making sure that we don't have a continual cycle of, trees falling onto neighbors and so forth. So we agree to make that part of our final development plan, that we would clean up the existing woods so that, not having those issues.
Mr. Sweetheart, could there be some type of like, you know, if you're going to own that property and you're developing the kind of half of it, would that be part of like something that a maintenance person could do, would be to make routine sweeps through that,
Right.
that lower 5, 8, because it's a pretty large site.
Yeah,
So I don't know about the,
on-site staff, we have a full-time manager as well as on-site maintenance person that, you know, will have a phone number. And
to ensure that you have some type of,
accessible, so if there's issues or problems, and yes, they will be monitoring, watching over the site, certainly much better than it is in its existing situation.
could you please just come to the, again, with sunshine law, so I just want to kind of make sure we're all,
dying here. So you said we'll make an effort. So are you committing as part of your adoption of the plan that you will also clean up that last 5 acres and you will put in fencing? I'm for the housing as far as low market. Like I said, I work with workforce development. Everyone needs a safe place to live, but I'm also very, because I work in that, I'm also, what he was saying, Mr. Iona, about 13 units, 2 units. Basically, there are always more than 2 people per unit. Now, fair housing, as a former realtor, I know there's only so much that you can do. But for us here that are concerned about, one, the access to Springdale. I take kids to school. It's already 25 minutes waiting just to get into the elementary school on Springdale Road. I don't see how you can guarantee, that's not my job, I'm not an engineer, I'm not ODOT, how this is not going to be more than a forbearance for the current residents to have this unit, have this many units right there at that, whatever their street is by the Speedway, by the convenience store. It takes forever to get down Springdale now just to get your kids to school. And all of that works together. And the other thing that Mr. Iona was saying, I don't believe that you can limit the amount of folks that can live in one unit for housing as far as kids. So how's that going to affect our schools as well? But I just really want to make sure that you are good neighbors, because no, the church does have representation here. Their church is in Forest Park. Their corporate headquarters in Missouri. And that landlord did nothing to keep this area clean. We're hoping that you will do what you say you do, past getting approval.
Thank you. Okay, that's the names of the people that were on the list. Would anyone else like to make a comment before we close this? None so appearing, the chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing portion of this meeting.
I'll make a motion that we close the meeting.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we close the public hearing portion of this. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring.
Yes.
Mr. Westfall.
Aye.
Mr. Gehring.
Yes.
Ms. McMullen.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passed. Okay, next on the agenda is informal concept review. We have none. Then old business.
Do we,
We need to go
Oh.
ahead and deliberate and then make a motion. So just for
I'm in a hurry.
that's fine. For the benefit of the audience, the board makes a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. So in this case, unlike the previous application, which was a final development plan, this is a preliminary development plan. This application goes to the Planning Commission here tonight. They will, Zoning Commission, they will take a vote, and then their vote is a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. It is the Board of Trustees who will take final action to approve this plan. If this plan is approved, it comes back before the Zoning Commission to sort out the kind of the fine details. So you've seen a concept plan tonight. The fine details would be more like what you saw with the La Pinata development plan, where you'll see specific numbers of trees, the specific number of units, bedrooms, market, like all that stuff. So you'll see the full plan. The idea here is to do all these plan developments in a two-step process, so that way you can see the concept And if that concept does get approved, some of the other details or conditions get sorted out through the final development plan.
So the fencing in the rear 5 will be addressed.
If it's approved. And that would be up to the board as well as the zoning commission can make a recommendation along with the conditions that different amenities be provided within the development. And then the board of trustees will either approve it with those conditions or change them. Make sense? Just wanted to clarify for everybody here.
Now, you have 2 more chances. Okay, we're going to get this correct. The chair would entertain a motion to accept this preliminary development plan with the conditions on it as written.
By staff? By staff, as written by staff?
They were written by staff.
I'd like to make a motion
We have,
that we accept the plans as proposed with the recommendations of staff, but I'd like to add 3 other recommendations to that if I could. One being some fence or obstruction in the back property that's acceptable both to the builder and to the community. That they clean up that back area, get rid of the dead wood as they committed here, and that they stay to 62 units, again, which was committed here. And I would be looking very closely at those 3 additional recommendations along with staff to come back. That would be my recommendation.
if I understand this correctly, we have to pass that
Yes.
before we pass this.
That's all one.
That can be all one motion, and then somebody would second it. And can I just provide maybe one comment? Looking at some of the issues from the people that have showed up tonight, the site is quite large. So I don't know if maybe fencing is going to be something that, I think maybe it would be a combination of fencing and security to
That's why I
make sure
say
that we get the right thing.
Fencing or some obstruction that is acceptable to both the builder and the people.
It always had fencing, always.
Okay.
It's just the Moore family owned it. If that was a veterinarian, he would report fencing.
What happened to the fencing? Where's the fencing
The
at
Moores
currently?
died, and the fencing, like the trees, deteriorated.
Deteriorated.
Have been broken down by vandals, like those running from the police and others, and those living in the woods. They break down the fencing.
Okay. My concern would be is if you build another fence, sometimes that can prevent people from getting in, like police and first responders, and might create a haven for people to get out.
There are ways for the police to get through.
Okay.
Through every street, there's an entrance way.
That's why I guess my condition would be is instead of making, because this would, if they do this and then it goes to the trustees, maybe that gets set in stone when there could be a better alternative that you might be able to work out with the applicant, if the applicant would be willing to meet or discuss something like that.
One security person going to secure 5 acres. One maintenance person has to take care of 60 units. And tenants.
And there's,
and
there,
parking structures.
there is a motion on the floor if there's going to be a second.
The reason the motion was worded the way I worded the obstruction is, no disrespect, the people that are here represent one comment. We may find other community members have a different appeal. So that's the reason basically my motion was throwing the onus back onto the developer to say you've got to find a community group that represents, maybe this is the proper group, maybe not, and then work with that group to say, listen, what is the proper way? Is it a fence? Is it a fence up close to the property?
Right.
What have you, okay?
Very good.
That was my intent.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion is to accept it with an added fence, a cleanup, and 62 units.
Fence or obstruction to keep people from cutting through, acceptable to both the builder and the community.
Okay, fence or obstruction.
Yeah.
Is there a
Okay.
second?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept.
Is there any discussion or?
Does anybody have anything to discuss?
I would like to say something. I feel for these people. They have nice houses there. They built their homes. They moved in there years ago. They've kept them nice. I know the area. And they didn't plan on spending their money on their homes and living there to have a high-rise apartment building put next to them. The zoning wasn't for that when they built there. It was for more residential homes like them. And my biggest concern is if I vote for this motion that's on the table, I've been on this board for 4 years. And when things are voted in, stuff disappears. It gets built, there's no fence. They say they're gonna have a guard. There's a maintenance guy that's there 4 hours a day. And I just don't want another headache for these people there. There's one across the street that has had plenty of headaches over the years. I know the area very well. And I can see it coming. I have a hard time voting for it.
I would just note, though, that this is a multifamily zoning, so by right, they can build fourplexes in here without coming in for a zone change or anything, just for the record. I don't know if we went over that. But this wasn't intended, this has been zoned this way for 50 years. It's always been zoned for multifamily. And I know that's something that sometimes we gloss over in our report.
It's R6, right?
It is an R6, so that's a fourplex. That's an urban residential zone, and that's intended to buffer from the B2 that's on Colerain over to this neighborhood. Now, it does lie on the boundary, and sometimes we gloss over in that presentation. So when staff looks at this, one of the things that we like, again, is it gives us a chance with the PD to make sure we get it right. What we liked was that some of the open space was preserved in this case, whereas somebody else could, by right, come in, clear the land, and then just put up, what I call the barrack-style development, where they just slap in, 4 bedrooms in a row and yield as many units as they can on a 9-acre site, which I think would be considerably more than what the applicant's done. So I know that some of the things that Marty didn't touch on, but when we were given the chance to work with the developer, knowing that this is a vacant site, that's what kind of did excite us with this one, is knowing that it is R6 and that, there's an out-of-town developer that could come in and build a bunch of fourplexes without even coming to the planning commission, similar to what they have on Sovereign Drive. That's one of the things that we liked about the PD, is that we get to work with somebody to say, hey, you need to have better materials, you need to have a better design than just, 4 walls, vinyl sided, 4 bedrooms and, 1 bathroom, and stack them in as much as possible. So that was one of the reasons that we were excited about it. So just something that I don't think we put in our presentation that should be stated.
It is.
How many fourplexes could you put on that property?
I think we need to stay focused as far as
30,000 square feet.
what's before us right now.
Don't worry about
Obviously,
fourplexes.
I think with the point that I think Mr. Iron is trying to make is that it is B6.
Yes.
The PUD, it could probably
R6.
do R6. Right? I'm sorry. It could be. They could utilize it in a similar manner without the approval of a PUD. Is I think the point that Mr. Iron is trying to make. And the PUD adds a few additional conditions and additional more open space and other things that aren't. But that being said, I don't think we need to dive into, what could, or, there's I think what's before you guys right now is the PUD. And I think based on the criteria that's been presented, the approval criteria, I think that is what needs to stay on point there.
Okay, are we ready to vote yet? Does anybody else have any comments? I have some I decided not to make, but does anybody have any comments?
Nope.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring?
No.
Ms. Smith?
No.
Mr. Westfall?
Could you come back to me later?
I go to you. You're the. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Miss McMullen.
Yes.
Mr. Gehring.
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Yes, reluctantly.
Motion passes.
And this is a recommendation that will be passed on. Ultimately, the Board of Trustees will have the final say. So this is a recommendation.
There is a second public hearing at the trustees meeting, and the adjacent owner will receive another mail. So we do send it back out to all of you guys, and we send that out. What's the, you'll get it well before the meeting.
Thanks for consideration.
Next on the agenda is an informal concept review. We have none. Old business, is there any old business?
Oh, no.
Okay. New business, is there any new business?
That's you. I would like to provide a brief report on a couple things that are going on. This year, as you've seen, last year, one of the big things that we changed as far as the way we run meetings, the correspondence that we have with all of you as the zoning commissioners. The big change was we changed our format of the presentation. We wanted to be more clean. We wanted to be easily read from not just your perspective while you're watching it, but for the folks out here in the audience that may or may not know a lot about zoning, right? So, these hearings aren't just for you all, they're also for the people, the neighbors, adjacent property owners to come and get information. As part of that rollout to kind of bring us up to date, we're going to be rolling out a new report format next year. So one of the things that really came to light at the end of last year with Abbeytown was our report kind of just goes up and down. The new format will be very delineated, and that will be intentional. So the beginning of the report, much like the presentation, will consist solely of data and facts. You will hear information about the case. You'll hear information about the application. You'll hear facts about the submitted development plan, and you will only hear data and facts. There will be no conjecture. There won't be any leading. It is just straight information. So it's just like we run the meeting, it's an information gathering session at the beginning of the meeting. After that, you will then be presented with the findings. So you get all the data, and then we're going to hit you with the ordinance, and it will say, based on all this data, here's what you all must consider when you make your decision. Because, we don't make decisions based on whether or not, they had a nice smile or, the kind of car they drive. It's based on a certain criteria for each different application. So we'll give you the criteria, and then we're going to hit you with the staff's recommendation and our comments based on that criteria. So an example tonight is there's 7 criteria for approval of a preliminary development plan in your report. That will come in the middle, and then we'll have staff report. So that be looking for that next month. We will have a meeting in February. We have a couple text amendments coming before you. One of those will be for food trucks, and then the other one will be for viticulture and wineries. So kind of interesting.
So is that February or March?
That will be for the February meeting. I know that there was a clerical error with the agenda, but actually I wouldn't say clerical. I don't know if Marty knew we were doing those text amendments yet. But February 18th, 2020, please mark your calendars. In addition to the new report format, I want to report on the comp plan. So we're going to call the comp plan Imagine Colerain. When you think about a comp plan, you're not looking at what other communities do. You're not benchmarking yourself against what other communities do. You're looking at what your community wants to be. That's why we're calling it Imagine Colerain. We're looking at what Colerain Township wants to be in the future. And in doing that, we're going to look at where we are today. And then we're going to set that vision for the future, and we're going to establish ways to get there. So in a nutshell, that's what long-range planning is. So this will be a year-long effort. We're hoping to wrap it up at the end of this year. This is something we've been doing over the past 2 years. The time is now to stop spinning our wheels, push this thing forward, and get it done and take it across the finish line. Because the comp plan is really, if you think about it, the plan's the beginning. You have to implement the plan. So the goal with this plan is we can't start making ourselves better and be the Colerain we want to be if we can't get the plan done. So it's something that we've been working on for 2 years. You know, I came from Hamilton. We won a state award for that. The place I was at before won a national award. We're going to have an award-winning plan. We're going to have an award-winning future. The time is now to get it done. And I look forward to working with all of you along the way. We'll have a lot more information as we move through the process. One of the big things that we'll be doing this year is it's going to be, instead of a 200, 300, 400 page document that, you know, you work really hard on for a year and a half and then you throw on the shelf, this is going to be a web-based digital document. It will be viewable by all. Anytime you want to get on and look what the comp plan's about, it will be online. I found over the years that this is the way you get more exposure to your plan. I can't tell you how many departments I've seen or worked at where the first thing you go in and you look at the shelf they have in their foyer and it's probably got 20 comp plans that they printed out 14 years ago and nobody's touched it or done anything with it. The thing I want to change here is instead of doing a document, letting it sit on the shelf, we're going to constantly be working that document, which means after we adopt it, that's when the fun begins. We'll be working with all of you. We'll be working with different community groups to make these recommendations happen. And throughout that process, this document will be a living document. It's something that we're going to constantly be coming back to and saying, hey, are we still moving down this path with this? Is this something we need to maybe pivot on and change? So again, just wanted to put that all on your radar. I think at some point, some of you might be part of a steering group, and I'll ask you all for a recommendation on that at a subsequent meeting. The last thing that I want to do is bring up an initiative that we're working on. So we spend a significant amount of money mailing these packets out. Our trustees do not get packets. And I've been tasked by township leadership to go paperless. So that means that you all would not receive the mail packets that you have anymore. Again, the trustees do not get a packet. They have agendas that are a little longer than yours, but they have asked that we go paperless, and you know, don't shoot the messenger on this one. But we do have a web-based program that you can go on. It's called Civic Clerk, and I don't know how many people look at it. Before I worked on boards where I think like a handful of my members didn't look at the packet before the meeting. But what we will have out here, just like we have at the trustees meeting, are tablets for you all to look at. You can look at the entire agenda on that tablet. You will have access to Civic Clerk, which is what the trustees use. You can log into Civic Clerk at your home, your computer, your tablet, your phone. You can even use your account to make notes on the plan so that when you come in, your notes are there. You can correspond with us, staff, through this portal. And it's something that as we roll it out, I'd love to give you all training on. You can use it very basically by just logging in and viewing the plans. You don't have to use all the functionality. If you want to use the functionality and mark up plans and contact staff and correspond, you're certainly welcome to do that. But that's something that we'll be rolling out over the next couple months. Again, it's something that leadership felt very strongly about. So we'll be moving that way here in the next few months.
So we're all going to be provided a tablet?
You'll have a tablet when you come here. When you're at home, you'll have to access it via phone, your own tablet, or you know, a laptop, computer, desktop, whatever.
Okay.
So that's all for my reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions or.
I like paperless. Since I joined the commission, I've always pushed, you know, just even save the mailer money. I'll come pick it up. So I do like the not only saving money from printing and mailing, but going green too.
I prefer the paperless too. I look things up and make my comments to myself on my phone or on my computer, and I don't open up the packets really until right before I get here. May I make one suggestion during this transition? Okay, if you could have a copy or two here for those that may not have, that are on the commission, that may not have a computer at home or have the need to look at the computer to learn, that they could walk in and pick up a packet instead of having to mail it out of information.
Certainly a great idea. Yeah, we could certainly have like a staff resource.
One or two copies, they can come in and grab it and take it if they want it.
It's a great idea. That's all for staff.
Okay. Administration, Mr. Administrator, do you have anything? Or did you just?
I'm done. That's good for me. Yes, that'd be all for the staff report.
Any
Or the
announcements?
staff comments.
No announcements? Next meeting will be February 18th, 2020. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion that we adjourn.
Second motion, was a second?
Yes.
We have a second. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.